if you don't know anything about King Herod except for what you've read, and if you read nothing else but what's in Matthew chapter 2, which is where we're going to be in a few minutes, if you read nothing else about it, knew nothing else about him, you would realize, yes, he is a complete wild person. But the more you dig into his life, the crazier he gets. Caesar Augustus reportedly said about King Herod that it was safer to be King Herod's son or pig than it was to be his own son. Now, I don't know how many pigs King Herod killed, but he did have 2 of his sons killed because he thought they were trying to get around him and usurp his kingship. And so, but before we get into the lessons that we're going to learn from him, I want to do one of my favorite things to do. And I know some of you are getting ready to roll your eyes, and that's okay because I got the microphone and I get to do these things. But I'm going to give you a brief history lesson on King Herod because I love history, and it really does. In a lot of ways, when we understand the background of somebody, we understand all the things that are happening behind the scenes that we're not as familiar with. It helps us get into the mindset of that person and really gives us a better understanding of what is happening. And so according to the first century historian Josephus, King Herod began ruling at roughly 40 BC. He was about 25 years old when he calls himself king, but he was actually a governor of Israel appointed by the Roman emperor. So Israel's under Roman control, and so the king of Rome places Herod as a governor as a favor to King Herod's father. So King Herod comes from a line of people that are well-connected, they have power, they have political influence, and so he is made governor. And so Herod he was an Edomite. Anybody know what an Edomite is? An Edomite is from the line of Esau. Now, if you know the Jews, the Jewish people, they are from Jacob. And so if you know the story of Jacob and Esau, that was a very contentious relationship and all of these things. And so you have Esau's line, the Edomites, and you have Jacob's line, the Israelites. And so there's all this tension that has been going on for thousands of years. And so Herod, as an Edomite, being placed in charge of Jewish people, not a great fit. So King Herod, he does a smart political thing, and he marries the daughter of Hyrcanus II. And so Hyrcanus is popular with the Jewish people, and his family was a part of the Maccabean revolt that had just taken place not too long before this. Ironically, King Herod is the one who comes in and ends that revolt in a very bloody way. And so at Hyrcanus' family, his father and brothers and family, they're all a part of that, the Maccabean revolt. So Herod comes in, shuts it down, and in order to try to appease both sides, to make peace, Herod marries Hyrcanus' daughter. And so that's how he's trying to just, okay, let's get past this. Let's get past all the bloodshed. And so they start making these political alliances and these kind of things. And so his brother-in-law, Herod's brother-in-law, becomes the high priest. Now, Herod's father-in-law is like, hey, you need to do this. And so Herod's not real happy about it, but his brother-in-law is forced upon him to be the high priest. And now this guy, after a period of time, he's at a pool party at Herod's house. Guy drowns. The one guy that drowns is his brother-in-law, who he didn't want as the high priest. Mysterious circumstances, right? So this is what happens. And then his wife that he married to forge this political alliance, Herod gets a little suspicious of her, and is like, hey, you're cheating on me. You're trying to end my kingship. And so Herod takes his wife's mother and says, hey, let's cook up this scheme. I need you to corroborate my stories, and we're going to accuse your daughter of adultery, and we're going to have her killed. Oh, and if you don't do this, I'm going to kill you. So her mother-in-law, she corroborates all this stories, like, yeah, she cheated on him, blah, 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 blah. Herod's like, hey, you're guilty. I'm going to have you killed. Now, coincidentally, this was also, it was kind of a forced marriage kind of thing, like, because of the alliances. But this was also his favorite wife out of 10 that he had. And he has her executed. He's like, all right, your punishment is death. And so they send the orders. And then Herod changes his mind. He's like, hey, I know I wanted to kill her, but I changed my mind. Don't do that. And the people have to look at him and be like, we already did it. She's dead. So now Herod, something breaks in his mind, in his brain. He's already kind of a crazy person, but now this has a psychological break, and so he's had his wife. Now he has his mother-in-law killed to cover up what they did. This guy is a crazy person. He sheds a lot of blood. So when we read in Matthew chapter 2 that he has all the baby boys under 2 years old killed, it's really not that big of a stretch for him. That's just kind of what he did on a Tuesday. All right? Now, Herod is also, he's a lunatic. He's a crazy person, but he is this incredible master builder. He builds this place in the mountain in Jerusalem, and it's called Herodium. And became like his sanctuary, his fortress. That's where he was eventually buried. And he builds it, and he goes up like, this is where I want it. But he's like, you know what? I don't really see Israel or the Jerusalem as well as I want. The view is not very good. So see this mountaintop that we are wanting to build this on? We're going to take that top of that mountain off, and we're just going to move it over a little bit and place it over here. It's 2,000 years ago. And that's what he does. You can see, look up pictures of Herodium, and you can see like this flat, it's kind of on this little bit of a hill, and then right next to it there's a big hill. Well, the big hill used to be on the other side, and he flipped it. Like he's this master builder. He builds a fortress in the desert called Masada, which could hold millions and millions and millions of gallons of water that they would have pumped in or brought in. And this became like his winter retreat, right? Think like of a health spa in the middle of the desert. That's what Masada was. He built Caesarea Maritima, which was a port city. And so he builds this up. And so now all of a sudden him and Rome have this incredible port on the Mediterranean Sea. He rebuilds the temple, and he rebuilds it better than what King Solomon had done thousands of years earlier. Obviously, technological advances and all those things happened, but it was this stark white and bright gold building, this incredible masterpiece that was the envy of everybody. And so he also builds in Samaria and Jericho and all these other building projects. He is using techniques that had never been used before, well advanced for what they were at that time. Like he is this incredible master builder, but he's also this lunatic who would kill you for thinking a bad thought about him. Like I said, the death of his wife is said to have caused a psychological break that he never fully recovers from, which leads him down this path where he is always looking over his shoulder for whisperers and who's doing what and what are they talking about over there? Are they talking about me? I bet you they're wanting to overthrow me, so I better go and kill them. And so all of these things, so when we read this story, and we read what's getting ready to happen in Matthew chapter 2, it makes a little bit more sense because this isn't just a one-time thing that happened. This was decades in the making. So this is roughly, Jesus was not born at 0. He was born at 3 or 4 BC, somewhere in there. So this is 35, 36 years in the making of what comes here in Matthew chapter 2. So if you have your Bibles, that's where we're going to be at. Bear with me. We are going to read most of this chapter this morning to get the full view of the story. So Matthew chapter 2. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where's the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When the King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. Now, side moment here for a second. The word for disturbed here means literal shaking. So the Magi come in, says, "Hey, where's the new king at?" And Herod literally starts shaking uncontrollably. And this is why I saw Israel shaked with them, because they were worried about what was coming next. King Herod's in a bad way right now. What is going to happen next? Verse 4, when he had called together all the people's chief priests and the teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I may go too and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. When they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and having been warned in a dream to not go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. Verse 13. When they had gone up, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up," he said, "take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for this child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so it was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted because they are no more. We think of Christmas as this warm and fuzzy time, right? We're going to drink hot chocolate. We're going to light fires in, fireplace. We're going to have, s'mores, or we're going to have Christmas cookies. We're going to get really comfy Christmas pajamas. We're going to sing Christmas carols. We're going to be singing around the tree. It's just going to be wonderful. We're going to ride around and look at lights and do all this fun stuff. Christmas is warm and fuzzy and great, and it's just all peace and harmony and goodwill towards all men. But the reality is, the story of Jesus being born is a story of conflict. But much like our Christmas pictures that we're going to post here in a couple weeks, right? They're going to be posts out of conflict, right? We're going to take pictures Christmas morning, later in the morning. We're going to scroll through Facebook and Instagram and look at all of our friends and family. Oh, look how cute they are. They're so happy. Their pajamas all match. And the reality is that morning, if you have kids, you understand what I'm getting ready to say, is that morning, Christmas morning, is anything but peaceful. It's conflict. Kids are up super early, right? We got to get, and then we're taking pictures and kids are smiling and mom is behind the camera. Smile, or I'm taking your presents away. Grandma calls. Oh, I talk to the grandkids. And the kids are like, they're more worried, like, I want to play with my toys. And dad's like, talk to your grandmother now or I'm taking them away. Right? Like conflict was, it's beautiful and it's wonderful and it's just, that's not. Christmas is out of conflict. There's conflict of mom and dad are in conflict because they spent too much money or didn't spend enough money. Did they buy the right presents? Did they buy the wrong presents? We should have bought them this. There's which family are we going to go celebrate with? Well, I want to go see my family. Well, I want to go see mine. It's all there's a lot of conflict in Christmas. And the reality is the story of Jesus being born, it is this wonderful, beautiful story of our Savior leaving the comforts of heaven, coming down to earth for us. But the story is one of conflict. There's a lot of conflict that is happening, that is going on behind the scenes, things we see, the results of what has happened, there is conflict. Right? We love nativity scenes. It's beautiful. We got to have nativity scenes up. Well, the reality is, the truth is, if you want a biblically accurate nativity scene, you won't take it from Matthew chapter 1 or Luke chapter 2. You will actually, if you want a biblical representation of what your nativity scene should look like, go to Revelation chapter 12. Some of you that know Revelation, you know what I'm talking about. In Revelation chapter 12, we read this story of this woman giving birth to this child, and there's a dragon circling them, waiting to eat the child. Right? And the child is Jesus. The dragon is Satan. So if you want a biblically accurate nativity scene, put that in your front yard. Put that in your mantle. The heretical one you've got up right now is false. Go put a real one on, because there's this conflict that is happening. And if you go all the way back to Genesis chapter 3, we see that with Adam and Eve, and God tells the serpent, hey, the offspring of Adam and Eve is going to crush your offspring's head. So this conflict about Jesus being born, it goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 3. And Herod is just continuing on the tradition of trying to cancel Christmas. But he failed. And his failure wasn't just in the fact that he failed to kill Jesus. That wasn't his only, that wasn't the failure that I'm talking about. His failure wasn't strictly just killing all the baby boys under 2 years old. Yes, those were failures, but his failures reached beyond that. And some of those failures can hopefully help us grow today. So we're going to talk about 2 of them. Failure number 1. That Herod, his number 1 failure is he failed to realize that Jesus is worthy of all worship. For Herod, it's all about him. It's all about me. I have this incredible strength behind me of the Roman soldiers. I've got the support of the leaders from Rome, and it's all, look how powerful and mighty I am. That he forgets that the only reason he has any power is because Rome gave it to him. Rome says, you can have this, but you better not step out of line or we're going to whack you. And not only did they give it to him, not only did Rome give it to him, but they only gave it to him because of who Herod's father was. So Herod doesn't really have any power on his own. He hasn't earned any of this stuff. Yet through this 35-ish years of ruling, he starts to develop this ego of look how wonderful and look how great I am. He named himself King of the Jews. He wasn't a king. He wasn't a king. But because of his deeds and his wealth and his power, he thought he was above worshiping anybody else but himself. His entire kingdom is self-centered. Now compare that to the Magi. The Magi show up, these people show up, these guys show up, and we don't know how many there are. We think that there's 3 because there are 3 gifts, but the reality is that nobody knows how many there were. But these Magi, they're descendants of the magicians that we read about in the Old Testament. These guys are probably descendants of the same guys that Daniel rubbed elbows with way back when in Babylon. And so these guys also come from power and control and influence and money. They come from this pagan background and similar to Herod, very similar to Herod, yet they realized something special was happening and they put aside all of their rights, all of their possessions, all of their power, all of their influence, all of their money. They put it aside in order to come and bow down to worship Jesus. When Herod dies, which is not too much longer after this story, all of his possessions and his wealth and his status died with him. Herod did not carry on a legacy that lasted for generations. In fact, Herod was so despised by the people that he ruled and even his own people who were part of the king's guard and the inner circle and those kind of things. He was so despised by his people that his final command was to the people that were closest to him said, the day that I die, I want you to go and arrest a whole bunch of popular Jewish public figures and I want you to execute them. Why? Because I want there to be crying and tears on the day that I die. The people are going to cheer when I die, and I want them mourning for something. This guy is a crazy person. But luckily for those around, his own men did not carry out the order. And so Herod dies, and he is alone. He's by himself. He has nothing and no one because Herod's only worship was for himself. Now, hopefully, we don't have similar tendencies as Herod, right? Like hopefully none of us are going around executing 2-year-olds, right? Like hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully we're not, killing our favorite of 10 wives that we have. Like hopefully like none of the crazy behavior. But in a lot of ways, we do similar things as Herod does by placing ourselves on a pedestal because we live in a culture hey, do whatever makes you happy. If it makes you happy, do it. If you like doing it, just do it because you're important, you're special. We're not going to keep track at little kids' soccer games because, hey, you're all winners. No, some of you are losers. And I don't mean losers like, oh, that's a loser. No, like you lost the game. Arrow's playing basketball. And she's like, oh, Dad. I'm like, no, you lost. They won. They're better than you today. Now you practice. Maybe one day you'll be better than them. Right? But that's the kind of culture. It's all about don't make me uncomfortable. Don't make me feel things. People want to go to churches where the pastors just like scratch their ears and make them feel welcome and all of these things. Listen, you're welcome here. I love having you here. But I'm going to stomp your toes whenever God tells me to. Because we need that. Because we live in a culture that doesn't get told. It's like, NBA, I love the NBA. I used to love the NBA. Can't watch it. Unwatchable anymore. And you ask anybody, and the reason is because this AAU culture of, hey, you're special, you're important, you're amazing to get you to, and then all of a sudden they realize, I'm not that great anymore. Like it's an impossible thing because all these players are so pampered and babied because they've been told they're special their entire life. Herod's been told he's such a special boy his entire life. Right? And everything that he's got is a result of somebody else's hard work. And so he places himself as an idol, which sounds crazy, but we do the same things. We live for our own selfish gains at times. We are living like Herod does. And we live as me as the center, as me as the king, as me as the queen. We're living with a heart like Herod's. We were never meant to live like that. We are not meant to worship ourselves. We were created to worship Jesus. And when we live off the praises of others or we exalt our own selves, we are going to end up, that road leads to destruction and death. And that's how it's happened. It's what happened to Herod. He died shortly after this, and Josephus, that first century historian, this is how he described Herod's death. Burning fever, ulcerated entrails, foul discharges, convulsions, stench, and the best one for last, maggot-filled organs. Let's go to lunch. Right? Like that's how one of the most powerful people alive dies. By himself, nobody listening to him, because his entire life was me, me, me. And we cannot live me, 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 because if we do, it will lead us to ulcerated entrails, foul discharges, and maggot-filled organs. We weren't meant to live as our own king. We were meant to live with Jesus at the center of our worship. The second failure that Herod has is he failed to realize that Jesus is worthy of all treasure. Now the Magi show up, and they bring all these incredibly expensive gifts, right? The gold, the frankincense, and myrrh. And understand at this point, Joseph and Mary are poor, right? Remember chapter 1, they have to go and offer the 2 turtle doves because they're so poor. And so they've got nothing, and they're sitting there in this house, and the Magi come in, and they're like, here's all these expensive, incredible gifts. It had to be mind-bending for them. Remember, like, if you've never had money and all of a sudden you get a little bit of money, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm the richest person alive. It's $1,000, calm down, right? Like, you might buy a tank of gas and a trip to Walmart. Like, that's maybe. Right? But so Joseph and Mary, now we don't know what they did with this money. I don't think it's a stretch that the gold and the frankincense and myrrh came the day before they fled to Egypt in the middle of the night and they had no money. So probably maybe that financed their trip. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But the point is that the Magi, they realize that the most important things that they own is not their possessions. It's not their gold or their frankincense or myrrh. The most important treasure that they have is the ability to bow down and to worship Jesus. To them, Jesus was worth their greatest treasure. And so my question for us is, how many of us can say the same thing? That Jesus is worth our greatest treasure. And I don't mean this as a toe stomp, and not even talking strictly financial, right? Like finances are a part of it. I believe absolutely 100% we should worship Jesus with our finances. Show me your checkbook, I'll show you your God, that kind of thing. But I also believe that it goes beyond just a financial part of it, is do we value Jesus in the same way that we value material things? Do we value Jesus the same way that we value our jobs or our status in the community or what other people think about us? Or do we value Jesus the same way that we value sports and academic and all of these things that we put ahead of God most of the time? Do we value Jesus more than that? And I would argue that by our behaviors and how we do things a lot of the time is that Jesus is not the most valuable treasure that we have. It's football and basketball and sports and music and job, all of these other things. And if we're not careful, other things can begin to soak up our treasures and our time and our resources. And as a result, Jesus gets what's left. Jesus does not deserve what's left. He deserves all of it from the beginning, and the world gets what's left. For Herod, it was all about protecting his greatest treasure, his power. For the Magi, it was all about giving what used to be their greatest treasure, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, their greatest treasure has become the ability to worship Jesus. All the money in the world can't replace what Jesus has to offer you. You cannot buy your way into heaven. You cannot buy your way into relationship. If you could, Herod would not have died the way that he did, because he had it all and he died with nothing. Once again, our culture is all about me, 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 and that is how Herod lived. But the Magi, instead of living me, 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 they lived he, meaning Jesus first always. And as we inch closer to celebrating Jesus being born, let's make sure that our treasures are in the right place. Right? Because we're going to say, we're celebrating Jesus' birthday and it's going to be wonderful, him coming. Yeah, but our behaviors over the next couple of weeks might not reflect that reality. Because we get caught up. I'm not saying if you're a bad person, if you get caught up in this, because we all get caught up in it. But we have to be smart enough and make good enough decisions that we slow down and be like, all right, God, what do you want from me this year? Like, what can I give you first and foremost? The story of Herod, I don't know. I'm trying to think growing up. I don't remember every Christmas I ever had growing up. But I'm pretty sure that Matthew chapter 2 didn't get read around the Christmas tree on Christmas morning. Right? Like we wake up like, hey kids, before we tear into these presents, we're going to read Luke chapter 2 for 30 seconds and then you can open them. Right? Like, I don't think we read Luke 2 and Matthew 1. We don't read Matthew 2 like, all right kids, before we think, as we're learning about Jesus, and Herod gave all the order to kill all the baby boys 2 and under. Right? That's not a part of the stories that we share most of the time. But the reality is, it's important, and it's a huge part of the story. We like the angels and the gifts and the Magi and the story of Joseph and Mary traveling to Bethlehem, making it just in time for the baby to be born. We love the shepherds and the animals. We love that the Messiah is born. But the reality is this story is much more complicated than the nativity scene and the carols that we sing make it out to be. It's got fear and worry and bloodshed and confusion. Jesus came into the world, and this is the good part. This is the good news. Why are we talking about all this bloodshed? Because this is why. Because Jesus came into a world full of Herods. He didn't come into some mythical Neverland full of unicorns and rainbows place where everybody's happy, everything is good, nobody has any problems. He came into a world full of evil and harshness for us. He came to deliver us from the Herods of the world. The part of the story that we're leaving out, the sadness, the murder, and the blood, and the suffering and death, it's important. It's the part of the story that explains why Jesus came to this earth. God comes to the worst places during the worst time and the most painful circumstances to share in our suffering, to care for us during tragedy. Christ has come to hear our sorrows and to bear our sorrows with us. We have not been left alone. Christmas is the promise that God's joy is deeper than our sadness, and that ultimately life is more powerful than death, and that the light shines even in the darkness. By telling only the fun and beautiful and nice and G-rated version of the Christmas story, we are actually shortchanging exactly what happened on that day. Because on that day, it goes much more beyond just a baby being born. That baby coming into darkness and death and evil for you and for me. So that is truly the part of the story that we should be celebrating. Be careful, I might start preaching in a second. Worship team, you guys, come on up. For Herod, Jesus being born was a threat to his lifestyle. And the truth is, I'll be honest with you, worshiping Jesus is a threat to your lifestyle. The things that you want to do, when you start placing Jesus at the first and you start placing that as a priority, it is a threat to your lifestyle. Having Jesus as the center of our treasure is a threat to our lifestyle because it causes me to take the focus off of me and put it squarely on Jesus. And when we do that, things change. Now hear me and understand this. I know that your life might be a mess right now. Like you came this morning and you're barely holding it in. It's a mess. It's chaos. It's pain. It's suffering. It's hurt. It's whatever it may be. But the good news of great joy that is for all people is that Jesus came down for your mess. He came down into a mess so He could be a part of your mess. And He did so that He could deliver us from pain and chaos and suffering. Will you stand with me? With all the darkness, chains, and evil, and bloodshed, and power struggles that are happening around this time of Jesus' birth, Jesus was victorious through it all. And as a result, the enemy trembles at his name. Jesus leaves the comfort of heaven for our mess, our chaos, and he won victory. And here's the greatest thing. His victory is our victory. The Lakers won $500,000 a player last night in that tournament. That's all their money. That's their victory. Jesus' victory is our victory. Now, why was Satan trying to devour Jesus? Because he knew what it meant. If Jesus is born and he lives, I'm in trouble. Why did Herod try and kill Jesus? Because he knew what was coming. If this baby is supposed to be the king of the Jews, if he is allowed to live, it is a threat to my lifestyle, and I've got to end it. If you are fighting something this morning, Jesus came to fight for you. And the enemy trembles at his name and his presence, which is why he did everything he could to stop it. But the good news is he failed. His failure is our victory. So as we sing this morning, I asked Pastor Regina this week, I said, listen, I called her Thursday night, like, hey, I know I'm messing you up, maybe, but like Sunday morning at the worship time, we're going to sing Tremble. That's what we're going. I pulled the pastor card. Hey, this is what we're going to do on Sunday morning. Every now and then I do that. Privilege. She said, all right, because I don't want today, I don't want to be, I want us to leave today with full victory, because the reality of Christmas is we win. The reality of Christmas is that the enemy trembles at Jesus' name. If you are suffering through whatever it is that you're going through this morning, if you have chains, if you have burdens, if you have heaviness, Jesus came into the chaos to defeat the Herods and the devils of the world who want to kill you, and Jesus wants to set you free from all of it. Do not leave here today the same way that you came in. If you're struggling, you carried that big old heavy backpack in, hey, these altars in a moment, we're going to open them. That's the best place in the world to get rid of that backpack. Jesus came to deliver you from that backpack. Do not leave here today without an opportunity to let him have it, because his victory is your victory, and he wants to share in it with you. He doesn't want to keep it for himself. He doesn't do it for his own self. Look at me, look how great I am. And that's what Herod would do. Jesus did it for you. But that's the good story of the gospel, is that Jesus came to a world full of Herods to deliver us. In the middle of the worst times of our life, the hardest times of your life, that little baby boy Jesus came to deliver you through it. Do not skip that part of the Christmas story. It's not all Elf on the Shelf and hot chocolate and Christmas cookies. Sometimes life is real. Sometimes life hurts. Sometimes life is chaotic and painful. But the good news is Jesus came for those moments. So this year, show up to your in-laws' house Christmas morning or Christmas Eve. Read Matthew 2. Read that part. Right? Like, mess with them a little bit. But use it as an opportunity. Maybe they don't realize it. Maybe they don't understand all the things that are happening. Critique them on their nativity scene. Tell them they need a dragon and a mama and a baby and that dragon trying to eat them. Like, if you want to be biblical, that's what it looked like. And why did it look like that? Because the enemy had to stop it, because he knew what was coming. And if he didn't stop it, you and I would be able to live victoriously. So he did everything he could to stop it. But the good news is our God is stronger than he is. Our God is bigger than he is. They couldn't stop it. I hope you have the best week you've ever had. If you're helping her out with the Christmas stocking stroll, I don't really know the plan. I think there's going to be lunch involved if you're doing decorating and stuff like that, or whatever. I'm not positive. Listen, most things, like a lot of things in the church that are happening, I don't really know what's going on, right? I don't know, talk to Katie. I don't know, talk to Keely. I don't know, talk to Pastor Regina. They're the ones that know these things. But stick around for tonight. Even if you're not working or helping with anything tonight, come back, bring your neighbor kids, bring your grandkids, your kids, your nieces, nephew. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be a great night. If you are new here or newer here, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. There's a card in the seat somewhere around. If you would fill that out so we can get some information from you, we would greatly appreciate it. We are honored that you came to our church today to worship with us. I want to be your pastor. We want to be your church. And we have an awesome church. We have some great people. And the best part about this church, you know what it is? What the best thing about this church is that the best is yet to come for us. It's going to be awesome. Pastor Regina, will you pray us out?
Lord, we thank you so much for your word today, for your spirit today, Lord. And as we go into this world and this life, Lord, and the chaos and the conflict captures us, Lord, we ask to remind us that you came so that we could have peace in our hearts and in our minds, and Lord, and in our lives. And we lift those to you and ask that you would touch every family, bless every family. And in your precious name we ask all things. And you say with me, amen.